Hello, my name is Anne Marie Cannon, and I'm the host of Armchair Historians. What's your favorite history? Each episode begins with this one question. Our guests come from all walks of life. YouTube celebrities, comedians, historians, even neighbors from the small mountain community that I live in. They're people who love history and get really excited about a particular time, place, or person from our distant or not so distant past. The jumping off point is the place where they became curious, then entered the rabbit hole into discovery. Fueled by an unrelenting need to know more, we look at history through the filter of other people's eyes. Armchair Historians is a Belgian Rabbit production. Stay up to date with us through Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Wherever you listen to your podcast, that is where you'll find us. Armchair Historians is an independent, commercial-free podcast. If you'd like to support the show and keep it ad-free, you can buy us a cup of coffee through Ko-fi, or you can become a patron through Patreon. Links to both in the episode notes. Anne-Marie here. A couple weeks ago, I talked to married couple Hugh Nini and Neal Treadwell, authors of the newly published book, Loving, A Photographic History of Men in Love, 1850s to 1950s. Hugh and Neal have been happily married for 30 years. The love between them is palpable, even after all of those years. They called it the Accidental Collection, and what began as a lucky coincidence became a rescue mission, charged with protecting antiquity. Hugh and Neal doggedly went about acquiring and preserving this visual narrative of men in love. Approximately 3,000 photos in, with the encouragement of others, they decided to share their collection with the world, bringing to light the hidden history that was always there but unseen, and according to Hugh, a powerful depiction of love between two people. P.S. The intro and outro music, Rachmaninoff Rhapsody on a Theme of Paganini, or as I tend to think of it, the eternal love song from somewhere in time, was chosen by Hugh and Neal, and the significance of it is that it was their wedding song. So Neal and Hugh, welcome and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
We're going to just get right off to the races, and I'm going to ask you the question. The question is, what is your favorite history that we're going to be talking about today?
Photographic History of Men in Love.
Perfect. So tell me about that. And why did you pick that history?
We didn't pick it. It actually picked us. It was a Sunday afternoon coming home from church. On our way to our house, we stopped off at this antique mall that we had been to many times before. And we just went browsing around, looking for nothing in particular. And Neal stumbled across a box with some photographs in it. And the photographs were pretty unremarkable except for one. And it was of a male couple, and they were embracing. One was behind the other, had his arms around the man in front of him, and they were leaning into each other. It was just a very sweet embrace, and we'd never seen a photograph like that before that was this old. So this was probably taken sometime in the 1920s. And so here we are looking at a photograph of a romantic male couple that's 80 years old and somehow survived those 80 years to end up in Dallas, Texas, in our hands. We bought it. I think we paid about $5 for it. When we went to the checkout station, we put it at the bottom of the stash because the other photos are pretty, as I said, unremarkable, hoping that they wouldn't go through the pile and say, oh, wait a minute, this is extra special. We have to charge you 10 times more or something. We paid $5 for the whole thing, and we took it home. We didn't have any plans for it. We didn't know why we had it, and it sat around in our office on our desk for probably about a year, I want to say. We just, as we clean up the desk, it would move from pile to pile to pile, and it would, have different places on the desk, and then eventually a second one showed up, and that was sort of the beginning of the beginning of the beginning.
So is that one actually in the book?
Actually, it's not. When we were going through the whole selection of the photos that would go into the book, that one didn't make it. And it wasn't that it wasn't a wonderful photograph. It's just that there were others that were more important that fed into the story that we had to present.
It's also just a tiny, tiny bit blurry, and it's taken from a distance, a little bit dark. And the tone of the photograph and the message of the photograph is very strong. It just wasn't a good candidate for being in a large format like an art book.
There's a lot of pictures in that book. I was surprised because you do a preface, kind of like two prefaces. One of them is a creative essay, and then you talk about the collection, and then it's all the pictures. And I was expecting there to be more words in the book, and I don't mind that there aren't because I love looking at picture books. This is a coffee table picture book is what it is, basically. I was really surprised at how many photos are in it. You said a second one showed up. What does that mean?
Do you remember?
Well, a second photo showed up. Well, we, in collecting, and it was probably about 6-9 months later, and we came across one in an auction, and it is a couple of two soldiers, and it's in the glass frame, and etched on the glass, they're leaning into each other, their heads are touching, and it says, "Yours always." And it was just so sweet. That writing captured with the look on their face and the love in their eyes and just the emotion you got out of it. We had to have it. And that was the second one. We don't know what the third one is. I mean, we never expected to, be collecting really anything. We just saw these. We thought the first one was the only one, and then we found the second one. It, wasn't probably until about number 300 or 400 that we realized we were actually collecting.
300. How many photos do you have about altogether?
We now have over 3,000 photographs.
Oh my gosh!
Mm-hmm.
It became an obsession.
Not right away. In the beginning, it was preservation activity. It was, how do we keep this photo around for another 80 years? And then the second one that we found, it was taken in the 40s, so it fell into a range that eventually developed in our collection, which was prior to 1960 and after 1850, that century mark. But we just started looking a little bit and finding more. And the first few years were pretty slow. There weren't a lot of ways to find these photographs like there is today. You actually had to do the footwork. And fortunately for us, the thing we had in our favor was that Neal's job required him to travel all over the United States all the time for decades. And as well, we have very close friends in Budapest and Paris, and we visit them every summer for the last 20 years. So we're in contact with, they're not collectors, we're the collectors. I guess they would be like vendors. People who are selling these photographs and all sorts of other kinds of photographs, not just this kind. So we made contact with vendors in Europe and all over the United States, and that's how it all sort of got rolling. But we didn't even realize that we were quote unquote collecting until about 6 years into it or more. Yeah, about 6 years into it.
Because if you think about it, photography really wasn't considered as art until probably the mid 1950s, 40s, something like that. And what we have is vernacular photography. It's photographs that have been taken just by anyone, and no one in particular. And that has now become an art because it's something that doesn't really exist anymore. And all photos are taken by your iPhone or your iPad, and they're all disposable. So vernacular photography is just another type of art that's out there now. So you have these people that collect or just gather photos thinking that someone, might want some obscure photograph, whether it's of homes or dogs or cats or whatever it is that that they like. And ours just happens to be photographs of romantic men in love.
What moves me about it is it's claiming a history that has been denied, that has been villainized, that has been criminalized, and it's claiming it in a very beautiful and loving way because I can tell from reading you guys are romantic, totally.
Yeah, big time.
And I love that that's the filter that I'm looking at these through. I know you talk a lot in the book. Well, you talk in the book about the criteria for choosing these pictures. And you say one of the criteria is the look. Can you tell me about the look? So
I'm sure you've had friends and family members who have fallen in love, and they didn't need to tell you that they were in love because you could tell by the look on their face, right? And so these men in these photographs, they have that look. Sometimes the look is obscured because they're kissing, so that settles that. But
something's going on there.
Yeah, not happy birthday. That look is that our criteria, we call it the 50-50 rule, and that is that the photograph, for us to collect it, has to be at least, we have to feel it's 50% likely that they are a couple. There are no 50-50 photographs in the book. We have about, I don't know, maybe 100 out of the 3,000 in our collection. But our 50-50 parameter was put to a test once when we were collecting these photographs of a World War II couple, John and Daryl. They were stationed in Europe during World War II. And the first 5 or 6 photographs we collected of them, they were very tame. They were just standing side by side, but there was a look in their eyes that, you know, it was faint, but we picked up on it and we said, we think this is a couple. And if it's not expensive, we'll go ahead and spend the money on a 50-50 photograph. So we had 5 or 6 of those, and then a little bit later, the one of the 2 of them embracing in the snow, wearing rings on their wedding ring finger in a very romantic embrace showed up, which proved what we suspected all along from the first 5 or 6 photographs that we got. John and Daryl were, you can't make this stuff up, they were members of the 42nd Infantry Division, nicknamed the Rainbow Division. And it didn't mean what it means today. It was nicknamed the Rainbow Division in 1917 after World War I. But if I can go a little further, a fascinating thing that we discovered later is that the Rainbow Division is very famous. 2 books have been written about it. And they're famous because on April 29th, 1945, they were fighting across Germany, headed toward the town of Dachau. And as they got to the outskirts of the town, somebody from the town stopped them and said, don't go into the town, follow this road down to the forest. And they were told you'll find, I'm sure they were told in German, a concentration camp. They didn't know what they were they didn't know what they were going to run into. Well, of course, they ran into unspeakable horror. And so the Rainbow Division liberated Dachau on April 29th, 1945. Germany surrendered, and the war was over in Europe a week later. And then sometime shortly after that, John and Daryl were in the Alps in Austria, in the snow, embracing, having their picture taken, wearing rings.
And that just adds so much depth to the pictures, because it's like not only is there the story of their love, but there's also the understanding of what they've just witnessed.
And John took pictures at Dachau of, some of the pictures are famous and are reprinted in books all over the world, but he took his own personal pictures of the concentration camp entrance and a really horrible photograph of a boxcar full of bodies. And it's, you know, so he was actually, it's confirmed that they were actually there. Not everybody in the 42nd Infantry Division was there that day, but John and Daryl were.
I'm getting really emotional.
This is the first time I've gotten through telling the story without crying. So
there's a couple of reasons why, because my mother was born in Belgium. Her family fled Belgium when the Germans were advancing, and I'm actually working on a documentary about that. So there's that whole horror and reality. Her family was massacred in World War I by the Germans. It's a long story. So there's that. And then this is what's going on with me. My daughter is married to a woman. And I have to tell you, in the past 4 years, it's been really scary to think that, you know, all these pioneers fought for her to be able to have that right. And I don't think she understands it in the way that I do. And then we have this administration who, if it was up to them, they would take that, you know, human right away. And so then when you're telling me about what they saw and what they experienced, it's all converging on me emotionally. And I can't thank you enough for sharing this collection with us.
It started to settle in us that this collection was important. This maybe started to form about 8 years ago, maybe 9 years ago. We started to think, oh my gosh, this is actually an important collection, and this needs somebody besides just the 2 of us needs to be seeing this. And then it was just trying to figure out how to do that, and that's what eventually led to this book. Because, you know, I think there are people out there that want to see this collection, want to see the book, and want to see its contents, and want to have their lives, you know, impacted and changed a little bit from it.
Yeah. One of the questions I always ask is, why is this history important? Which I think we've kind of just talked about it, but maybe you can expound on that a little bit more.
Well, I think it has a lot of different avenues to take to pull out the importance. And one, that we've come across has been just the recognition part of family and showing that, we're nothing new, that couples, male couples, female couples have been around forever. And in a lot of our photographs, you see family connection, you see the family support that's there. And so it was a challenge to take the photographs, but seeing that there are some family unity in those photos has been pretty powerful. But we also have received so many emails from the book about how it has made a difference in people's lives and how they're sharing the book. We had grandparents that bought it for their grandson, and they did a dedication saying, "This is for you and your fiance in celebration of your engagement." And it said Grandma Jude and Papa, and I can't remember Papa's name, and I almost lost it when I read it. It was just so heart touching. And we get these emails, don't cry because I'm going to start crying, all the time. We have a young man that was actually one of Hugh's former students.
Heterosexual, married. He's married now.
And he bought it for his dad, who just came out, who's in his 70s.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So, so there's parents buying it for their children, children buying it for their parents, brothers buying it for their brothers and sister. Yeah, it's just crossover, and they're talking about what it means to them and how it's made a difference, and hoping it'll make a difference in the relationship between themselves. And so you just get kind of overwhelmed at what people share with you, because it opens up just a different perspective of what we are doing, we thought we were doing, but it just brings new light to it.
And one of the things that, historically speaking, this occurred to me last night thinking about coming into this interview. Prior to photography, you had to have the interest and intention of an artist or something like that who was going to paint your portrait as a couple or as the Duke of this or the Duchess of that or whatever. That was the template for, being presented and represented historically before photography. Photography comes along, and all of a sudden, we can do this ourselves. We don't need you. We may have to hide it to keep it alive and surviving, but we can bypass all of those social hurdles and just you can take your own picture starting at least in 1902. And prior to that, all you'd need would be a sympathetic photographer, which I'm sure there were many.
Well, and what audacity. What audacity for somebody in the 1850s who was in love and their love was criminalized that they would take those pictures. And what a commitment.
A lot of the criminalization came on later, actually.
Oh, okay.
We're not sure how much audacity there was back then, because there certainly was not there wasn't the anti-gay industry that exists today and is really well funded. These people, they spend every waking minute of every day thinking about how they can ruin our lives, because that's their mission. And they get paid a lot of money to do that. That didn't exist during this time. I think that what we've seen, at least, is that there are a lot of examples of couples that were very comfortable with their friends and families. And, the pictures were taken, as a group. And, I'm sure it wasn't a walk in the park for everybody, and probably not for most of them. But I think it's an open question as to whether or not it was worse then than it is now. As we, talked about briefly, we've got, a very scary Supreme Court, sitting there in Washington right now, and that who knows what that could lead to.
And there's also the if you look at it from a photography aspect of it, so tintypes started around the 1860s, and tintypes it's a positive onto a tin, so there was never a negative used. So when the photograph was taken, it is processed and handed to the person within 10 to 15 minutes. So, you could slip in something really fast, and, I'm sure the photographer is on to the next person, because they were doing this at state fairs and carnivals and places like that to take the photographs. So that was
photo booth.
Yeah, and then there's the photo booth, where you get into a booth and you're the subject, you're the photographer, and you're the developer, and nobody has to know anything. And we have a huge photo booth section. So that was, you were able to, get away with a lot that way.
So one of the questions I have for you is, it's an assumption on your part with these pictures that they are people that are in love, and you base it on the look. But have you had any of the photos, have you had it validated that, yes, indeed, that is what you were seeing?
Well, the photographs of John and Daryl, the two soldiers from World War II, the reason we know so much about them is we got the photographs from his nephew. And he was only out to his nephew, nobody else. John, sadly, was confined to a wheelchair after World War II for the rest of his life because he came down with muscular dystrophy. And he and his mother, John and his mother, lived next door to John's sister, and her son was his nephew. That's the connection that we have with John. The nephew is alive today, and he's filled us in on a lot of information about his uncle.
Is the nephew the one that you bought the photos off of?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yes. Wow.
Right. And then we have several photos that came from a photo album. So the photo album tells the story as well with the interaction. Yeah. It's not the one photograph, it's several photographs of the two guys together. And normal, everyday life, and then loving photos as well mixed in.
And we would say that we have evidence that they are in love with each other. The photographs, they show that. But this is where we stop short. We don't identify anyone in the book as gay because we don't have those pictures. We can identify John as gay because he told his nephew that he was gay. And he lived his life as a closeted gay man until he passed away in his 70s. Mm-hmm. So we're not saying anybody's, gay or homosexual. We're saying that they're in love with each other.
I love that. Another question I like to ask is, where can we learn more about this history, this elusive history, besides your book?
I think we're it. Seriously. It's interesting that the books that have been published that are sort of on the outskirts of this collection, they tiptoe up to it, but they never quite get there. Historically, over the last 20 years, there have been about 5 or 6 books that have been published, and we eventually ended up owning them all, but we didn't know about them when we started our collecting. This collection is not just what's in the book, but the over 3,000 that we have, and you're not even seeing the tens, if not hundreds of thousands that we didn't collect. We just went not quite right for our collection. And it's so laser focused on the subjects being in love with each other, and we have not seen anybody else doing that. They may be, we just don't know about it. And just in our
we've even had people reach out to us and say, well, I collect photographs like this. However, they write back and say, but they're not quite like this because yours really focus on a loving photograph of two people together. So, it just reinforces our thought that, we homed in on one specific.
You'll see photographs that depict two men who are camping it up. They're obviously gay and they're playing it up a little bit. We don't collect that photo. That's just people having fun. We collect a photo if two people like that are expressing love towards one another. That'll go in our collection.
And, to go back to your question about where can you find more history about this, I think one of the things that we want to accomplish this book is to hopefully build on that history, to have people be flipping through the book and say, oh my gosh, that's my great-great-uncle, or that's my great-great cousin, or somewhere. It could be their grandfather, who had to go to a straight life or something. That we have had one interesting story that's come about, but it's just getting people to have that conversation, or maybe they have a photograph that they look at differently now and go, oh my gosh, that was my uncle and that was his boyfriend for all the years, the two bachelors, and maybe they want to share it with us.
The day after the Guardian article hit, a professor from Vienna, contacted the Guardian newspaper and said, could you get in touch with the authors? I know who these two people are in the photograph. I would just like to know if they can tell us when it was taken and who took it, and could it have been this person, this person, this person. And he identified the two people in the photograph as Rupert Brooke, a famous British poet, and Duncan Grant, a famous British artist. So we Googled their names and we saw that, and holy cow, if it's not them, it's their twins. And so this is Rupert Brooke, the poet, and Duncan Grant, the artist. And the picture was taken in probably, we think, about 1915, because Rupert Brooke passed away at a young age. I think he was 28 from an infected mosquito bite, of all things.
But it's a 2-page spread. It's page 2, 10, and 11 in the book, and
it's a gorgeous photograph. Neal's favorite.
It was my favorite even before this. It's a work of art. It hits.
Yeah. It's stunning.
Aces on every aspect. It looks like something in a museum.
You know which one is my favorite?
We'd love to know. Yes, we'd love to know.
It's the one of the 2 young men who look like teenagers, and they have the sign.
Yeah.
It says, not married but willing to, and the look on their face, they're so sweet and so innocent, and they just look so earnest. Mm-hmm. I love that picture. That's my favorite. I feel like it just says volumes.
That photo is one of 5 in a strip of the two guys, and 2 of the photos are in the book. There's that one, but then there's the validation of them holding the sign, because that was a prop that a photographer would use, and it's usually of a single man that dresses up in his best clothes, his Sunday clothes, and he'll hold the sign, hoping that he can pass it around to find a young lady that would like him. But here's 2 guys that held it up together, and it wasn't that they were both promoting themselves or wanting another woman. There's a beautiful photo beside it that really tells, because you can see in their eyes they're in love. But there's a photo, they have an umbrella, they're looking at each other, and their fingers are intertwined on the stem of the umbrella. And so between those 2 and the others, it
slam dunk.
Yeah, slam dunk. It pulls at your heartstrings to see it. And
the awareness for a couple that young, approximately 120 years ago, and what we discovered, we collect these photographs based on the look. And it wasn't until we started choosing them for the book and seeing the larger scans of them that we noticed how many of these couples are wearing wedding rings. And they're not married to women. The wedding rings are between the 2 of them. This photograph of this young couple, along with so many other photographs in the collection, has informed us that, we've been together almost 30 years, that we're nothing new in the evolution of history and society, that we can document our type of relationship all the way back to the beginning of photography. As I was saying, as we're getting into the book closer and closer, it wasn't until that point that we started noticing all the jewelry that we had missed because we were only checking out the looks in their eyes. And your favorite photograph doesn't have any jewelry, but that sign is, worth the Hope Diamond, I think.
So when did you start documenting more of the experience of finding the photos and that type of thing?
It was, I think, after we moved here to New York, and Hugh started scanning all of the photographs. It
was while we were still in Dallas, actually. Yeah, a little bit before. So around 2010, maybe. Yeah, halfway mark.
Yeah. We decided we better keep some type of record, and instead of just keeping paper records, which we do, we still like paper. We have them all scanned in the date where we found it, the size, if there's any writing on it, because a lot of the photographs, that's something else that gave us clues to the photographs. There could be names on the back, little things. The 2 guys with the man saying behind them that says,
yeah, Eddie expressed a new kind of love with Jerry last night, or something like that. So you look at the photograph, and it's 2 guys, and then there's a guy standing behind them with his hands on their 2 shoulders, and they all look like they're
holding hands.
They are holding hands. That's right.
But you're wondering, what is this all about? And then there's the writing on the back.
Yeah. And it's in 1915. That's 1915. That photograph, I remember.
Oh wow.
There's sweet things that come out. We just got a photograph that today that it's a guy in a wheelbarrow holding a baby and another guy pushing him.
That came?
Yeah. No, it didn't come. But it's on its way.
Oh, okay.
And I saw it and I went, this is so cute. I mean, but it looked like it could be maybe 2 brothers and one holding a child or something like that. And on the back of it, it says, pushing my boyfriend and Charlotte in a wheelbarrow. And then it says love something on the bottom of it. Mm-hmm. So, I just happened to, see the back of the photograph, which solidified me saying, this is my boyfriend in this photo.
And so how old About what time period is the photo?
That one looks like it's about 1930s.
Oh, wow.
40s probably. Yeah. One other interesting thing about, because people are always trying to go, well, is this really what they're claiming it is? And so, are you familiar with the author Christopher Isherwood?
No.
He wrote the short story that led to the movie Cabaret with Liza Minnelli in it.
Oh, okay, yeah.
British author, very famous. He was famously gay, and he and his boyfriend have tons of pictures taken pre-World War II. And if you look at pictures of the two of them, you think you're looking at a picture of two strangers. There's absolutely nothing in that photograph that would indicate that they even know each other, much less are a couple and have an intimate physical relationship. So for all of the, it's possible that you could find a photograph of two people who look like strangers, but are in fact, married to each other.
Where, if we do, where do we see this history in pop culture? Do we?
Now we do. It's incredible how movies, television shows, and things like that have opened up and started to embrace this, this notion that a male couple or a female couple could be in love with each other and have a life together and committed, and just in all the same ways that heterosexuals have had for years. And what we've discovered before we published the book, we sort of test drove the collection a little bit. We put together a slideshow presentation with music, and people knew that we were going to publish a book, but they had absolutely no idea whatsoever what it was about. We didn't tell them anything. And so when it was possible, when they were in our presence, because we wouldn't ever email this out to anybody because we didn't want the contents to get out, we would say, would you like to see the book? And they would say yes. And then we'd sit them down in front of the TV, we'd start the slideshow, and they would just be gobsmacked into silence, unable to speak. They were so overwhelmed by what they were seeing, tears often. And I'm talking, my best friend and his wife from Houston, and, friends of ours from here and friends of ours from there, and straight people, gay people sometimes, but I think mostly straight people. Yeah. And everybody's reaction was the same. They were just bowled over by the message of love. That is the same love that that Neal and I feel, that our parents felt, that other couples feel. It's not a different love for these different categories. It's the same love. We all fit under the same umbrella of love.
And it's interesting because we didn't really start showing this collection to anyone until like 7, 8 years ago, and it wasn't. We didn't think anybody would want to see it. Yeah, we didn't think. We thought we're collecting something. It's meaningful to us, but they might think we're a little strange for collecting photographs of dead people. But but there was emotion there to us.
We never talked about not showing it, right. But individually we did. We never thought maybe we should show this to our friend that's coming over because we have lots of friends and family and so forth. It was never a thought in our head that we would show this to anybody for no other reason than we just didn't think anybody would be interested.
When did it occur to you to do this?
It's
Tony.
One of the guys that we had purchased photographs from, it'd been a while, we purchased a photograph from him. Hugh was communicating back and forth, and he said, oh my gosh, wait, don't send this photograph to our home in Dallas. We live in New York now. And Hugh gave him our address, and Tony wrote back, you live 2 blocks from me. So that photograph he slipped through our mail slot. And then a couple of months later, there was another photograph that he bought. And so Hugh said, why don't we just meet up at Starbucks or something and, and just have a little coffee and chat. And so when we met up, we have all the photographs and albums now. We try to take care of them and make them look really nice. And so we took 2 albums with us and sat down, and Hugh said, Tony, would you like to see what we've been doing and what we've collected? He said, sure. So Hugh handed him the first album, and he opened it up, and he flipped through it page by page, taking in all the photographs, set that one down, took the next one, page by page, went through all of it. And at the end, he just shut it, looked at us.
And he said, you've got to publish this. And that was the last thing we were expecting to hear, because we thought he would he would think that our collection was kind of pitiful or something, because he'd been doing much longer than we had. We'd only collected 5 or 6 photographs from him over the years, and this was one of the first ones since we moved to New York. And anyway, we thought that he was just trying to get out of the conversation politely, but it wasn't the last. That was the beginning of us starting to show it I think the next time we showed it was 5 years later, wasn't it?
Quite a few was Jen,
Jen,
a friend of mine from
probably
work.
5 years later. She said the same thing. You've got to publish these. And so then we started showing them to more friends, and we started getting the same response. And so we had already started to feel a sense of responsibility and obligation to share this with the world. And this was just confirmation coming from the universe saying, yeah, you're supposed to do this. Figure it out quick.
And so you had a publisher, or did you publish it yourself?
So a friend that I worked with at my company had a friend who did writings and on articles. He's a writer for the arts. And he said, I know someone, it's a publisher, I'm going to meet him in Milan. And so we gave him a memory stick with some photos on it just to show. And so he goes in to do his little presentation. He says, I want to show you something that some friends of mine have. He gave him the memory stick and popped it in. He's showing some photographs going through on his screen. And about the 10th one, he says, I've got to meet these guys. And so this is a publisher in Milan. Within a month, is sitting in our apartment here, looking at the photographs, going through, and it has just snowballed from there. It's a straight man, has children, but he saw the importance of the photographs and the message that they carried and what it would mean to have a book like that would be published that could share this message.
We got very lucky with getting thrown together with him. He does some of the best art books in the world. And the quality, you have the book, you could see the quality. It's so stunning, yeah. And he talked from the very beginning about how the quality that he wanted to produce with this collection. He's a publisher, but he's also a citizen of the world, and he's an artist. In his mind, he's an artist. At the very beginning, he understood everything fully. It was automatic with him. And so we feel very lucky that we had someone with his vision. We were able to collaborate with someone of his vision.
Yeah.
And what was able to do is build, we call it the loving community.
Yep.
He went at this project as having a baby. And so that's how he talked about it and giving birth to a baby. And it did take a little over 9 months. But he brought together 2 designers from Montreal, Canada, that designed the book with us. He was able to find a phenomenal photography scanner that was from Belgium. And so we flew over to Italy to take the photographs. The man who scanned the photographs drove down from Belgium. We all met together. So, there was that aspect from it. And then he reached out and he said, this needs to be a global launch. Usually a book is launched, and if it's someone from the U.S., it's their project, and it launches in the U.S. and slowly around the world. We launched in English, German, French, Italian at the same time on October 14th, and 1 month later, which is now, have added Spanish into the editions. So it gave the world appeal, and which helped really with pushing the book in press. It's the amount of press that we've received from around the world, from Germany and France and Italy, as well as the U.S.
Finland.
I know we get
not even in Finland.
We get through Instagram. We get press reaching out to us all the time from all these obscure, they're not obscure countries, but just tiny countries just wanting a piece of the history and wanting to share our message because they see the importance.
It's universal.
Yeah.
Yes. We woke up today to a couple of friends of ours who live in Barcelona, and they said, good morning, look, you're on our TV in our living room. A Spanish news program, national news program, was running a story about our book on their television in Barcelona. And so they filmed it with their iPhone and sent it to us.
And yesterday, the BBC Reel had us on. One of my high school friends, who is now a Southern Baptist minister, female minister, sent me a message on Sunday night saying, oh my gosh, you guys are famous. I was looking for some real news, BBC Reel, and there it was.
It's just, my heart is so full with this. It really is.
We would like to clear up something. The only complaint, if you want to call it a complaint, that we've had about the book is that it doesn't have more people of color in it. And the reason for that is really simple. We have over 3,000 photographs in our collection, and we have collected every single photograph of an African-American couple or a biracial couple that we've come across, every single one of them. And that's a number of about 30, maybe 30. They're very rare. extremely rare. And when you're lucky enough to find one, it's going to cost you a lot because they're expensive. And so we've been able to collect, we think, around 30. We haven't done a head count, but we think it's 30. And when it comes down to taking a collection of 3,000 down to 327, then you get into, okay, what can be reproduced in a book in a large format? And 2 of the photographs of African-American couples were very good and a good fit for that, and they're in the book. But the reason there's not more than 30 is that there's just not that many out there. We wish there were more, and we will continue to collect every single one we can find. But at the point of publication, we had 2 to choose from, and they both went into the book.
One other thing that gets brought up is a lot of times people will say, well, what about 2 women in your book? And are there any photographs that you collect on that? And we didn't realize we were collecting what we have now. Yeah. We just started, it just organically happened. So if someone else wanted to do a book about that,
what a great idea. I know there's probably people out there with that collection too.
Yeah, we're tapped out, so just male couples, that's it. That's all we can afford. We know our collection really well. The book is a manifestation of the collection, and when it was finally done and we received our copy about a month ago, did you go through it?
No, not for a week.
I didn't either. We just kind of nervous to open it up and see what happened, because the process was really very productive and very collaborative. And then there's that 0.01% that everybody disagrees about some aspect of it, and everybody gets heated about it, and it seems bigger than the whole 99.9% that came before it. But I didn't open the book until about a few days ago, and even looked through it, and it was in preparation for another interview we were doing, because we couldn't tell, looking at the book, if the message of our collection was speaking or not. We were just too close to it. And it was after it was published, and we started getting responses from people from all over the world, from places where the book doesn't even exist, but they saw an article about it and they're inquiring about it. They have shared some of the most amazing, sometimes heartbreaking, sometimes heartwarming stories with us. And that sharing, and to be able to hear that because of this book from these people that we don't even know, confirmed for us that the message of the book did come through. And it confirmed that people are able to hear the message, and in some small way, and then maybe in some more significant way, it has been a healing or closure for some part of their life that was a little bit of an open wound or something. That's what's been expressed to us. And so it confirmed for us that the book did succeed in what we hoped it would, and that is to propel this message of romantic love for anybody who wants to know about it, wants to hear about it, wants to take it in. Men, women, male couples, female couples, heterosexual couples, single people who just want to know that this is a real thing, and it's coming from an unexpected place, a place that, in order for it to be here today in book form, had to be hidden during its lifetime and survive all the years after that for it to end up under our roof and in this book ultimately.
Right. And I think you mentioned that in one of the part of the foreword about it's not just claiming a history, but it's validating their history, each person in the photograph.
The way we put it is that they are getting to narrate their own lives for the first time in history.
Right.
Their lives were narrated by everybody else, and they had to stand by silently and listen to that, and now they get to narrate their own lives. We were in love with each other. We mattered to one another. This is what our life was really like.
And that's beautiful. That's everything.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. There was another thing I wanted to ask you. Tell us about the umbrella pictures.
The first one we got, we bought because of the look on the 2 guys' face. We didn't even think about it.
And it was early.
Yeah, it was early.
Very early. One of the first few.
That one we bought, and then it was probably a couple of years later we found another one, 2 guys under an umbrella. And then they just started slowly, organically showing up. We're like, well, this is kind of interesting. There's kind of a theme going on with this. And it just shows that, we look at different ways, but it is kind of like the rainbow back before there was the rainbow, because it shows protection. It shows unity between the 2. There's one photograph in the book where 2 guys are snuggled up behind the umbrella, and there's 3 ladies behind them, like they're protecting, but there's that umbrella that's embracing them as well. I think we have about maybe 50
We started to notice the pattern about 5 or 6 into it, And starting in the late 1850s, going up through the late 1920s, you see this pattern of a male couple declaring themselves to be a couple by standing under an umbrella together. We were only collecting the photographs because of the looks in their eyes, that look that we talked about earlier. The umbrella just started to notice this pattern as they accumulated more and more and more. But it was some kind of a declaration, secret code or something.
We haven't found confirmation on that. There's
nothing written about it. The only thing is our photographs. But the photographs speak for themselves. We have, like you said, 50 maybe or more, and it's a message. They're sending out a message to somebody.
Right, and you wouldn't know. But I mean, just the fact that you see that pattern and you express it, I think it's part of claiming the history.
Yeah, claiming it and revealing it for the first time.
Yeah.
We did have one interesting one show up. It happened through Instagram. There's a photograph in the book, and there's a spoon in the cuff of one of the guy's pant legs. And we thought it has to mean something maybe like spooning or something, or it was a joke, something to go along with that. A lady who follows us on Instagram posted a photograph of two ladies in Victorian dresses, and it's the back of them, and they're leaning into each other, kind of hugging, but there's a silver spoon tucked into the big bow of each one of their dresses in the back. And she said, so I would assume that the spoon and the cuff of the two guys' pants relates to them being together, because that's what that represented back in those days. So I did send her on the mission of umbrellas as well. I sent her a private note. Check out umbrellas.
That's the other thing you've done, is you've created an international community. Yeah. And it's a permeable, it's open, and people are reaching out to you and they're sharing their information with you, and it's really powerful.
Part of something positive, that a message of love, and when they see it and they can relate to it, they want to be a part of that type of community and sharing. And you can read the excitement and the emotion in what they share, and it has built a beautiful, loving community.
It really has. Just a little story about myself and my family. So there's 6 kids in my family. My daughter comes out to me.
When did she come out to you?
Probably about 13 years ago.
Oh, okay.
She got engaged 4 years ago, and my mother was really sick. And my sister, because they were going to wait a couple years, and my sister said, I think you need to do it now so that Grandma could be here. My mother lived for the next party and the next trip. Those are her 2 things. And she was pretty not well at that time, but she was going to live to go to this wedding. But coming from where I grew up and how I grew up and what I was told, to the fact that all of my siblings showed up and they were there at the wedding, in my wildest dream, I wouldn't have thought that would happen. The thing that happened that meant so much to me is the fact that I'm going to have to send you the picture, but all of my siblings were there. Their kids were there. I mean, they came from other states. We're not a rich family. But they were all there, and it just, this feels like that. It meant so much to me, meant so much to my daughter. But in the 70s, when I was growing up, I could have never envisioned that. Yeah. And this is part of that movement forward with it. Your book is.
And that's a beautiful story, by the way. Thank you for sharing it. Heartwarming. And what this book is causing to happen. People, sharing stories like this. One of the things that we hope this book will cause to happen, just personally, I never suffered a moment of my life in fear of God that I was going to go to hell for being gay or anything like that. Just absolutely not, nothing. The one hesitation I did have is that, I'm 65, so back in the mid-70s when I'm coming out, I couldn't imagine what a life with another man looked like. There was no vision of, what we have for me to model my future on. So I wasn't gay and I wasn't straight. I lived like a monk for about 3 years until, I don't know, that things finally just sort of fall into place. So, fast forward to today. Men and women, husbands and wives, are giving birth to kids every day that are going to grow up to be gay. That's just a fact. And they have nothing to base their hopes and dreams for that child on until maybe now. maybe they'll get our book, and by looking into this past, we'll be able to see a future for their child. That's Neal and I together again, almost 30 years. Lovely marriage. We love each other. We're happy together. This is what I couldn't imagine when I was a teenager. But, it did happen, and it's lasted a long time, and here we are. It's possible. And so, parents, they're getting fed a lot of bad information, unfortunately, and most of the time it comes from religious institutions and religious leaders. So there needs to be something to counter that, and I think this book may help in some way to do that. People will look at it and go, "Oh, wow, there is love between Hugh and Neal, and your daughter and her wife. It's the same love that we all feel, that we all long for and hope for, and cherish when we have it."
That's a good way to end. Hugh and Neal, thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate you inviting us on.
It's been wonderful.
There you have it, Hugh Nini and Neal Treadwell. The book is Loving, a photographic history of men in love, 1850s to 1950s. To find out more about the book and about Hugh and Neal, be sure to check out our episode notes. I'd also like to remind you that Armchair Historians is now available to listen to on YouTube. So be sure to subscribe and like, and leave us some comments. Thanks for joining us today, and have a great week.